Welcome to the Deep Dive from irisharchaeology.org. In this exploration, we're turning our attention to, well, one of the most enduring and evocative features of Ireland's ancient past, the portal tombs.
Ah, yes, the dolmens, as many people know them.
Exactly, those monumental stone structures.
Standing sentinel across the Irish landscape, they really are. Well, these megalithic constructions, with those massive capstones seemingly defying gravity, they truly feel like gateways to another era.
They really do.
They connect us, I think, pretty directly to the minds and efforts of the first farming communities to settle here on this island.
Absolutely. And they spark an immediate curiosity, don't they? I mean, who are these people who could not only conceive of, but actually execute such ambitious projects?
What was driving them?
Right. What was their motivation? And what can these silent stones reveal about the dawn of the Neolithic in Ireland? That's really the puzzle we want to try and unravel in this deep dive.
Okay, so we'll be systematically exploring the defining architectural characteristics of coronal tombs, trying to situate them within the broader chronology of Neolithic Ireland, and considering the evidence for their origins.
And then maybe dig into the engineering side?
Definitely. We'll delve into the remarkable feats of engineering their construction entailed, the insights we've gained from looking inside them at the chamber.
That's been found.
Exactly. Plus their geographical distribution, where are they found, and the various compelling interpretations of their purpose, the rituals associated with them, and maybe the underlying belief systems they might reflect.
Sounds like a comprehensive look. So let's begin by establishing the context. We're looking at the Neolithic period in Ireland, a transformative era. When did that kick off? Around 4000 BCE.
Yeah, roughly 4000 BCE. And it really marked a watershed moment, as you say.
A profound shift.
Indeed. The Neolithic signifies a huge shift in human history in Ireland. It's characterized by the introduction of agriculture, so the systematic cultivation of crops, and the domestication of animals like cattle, sheep, goats, pigs.
Right. This whole agricultural revolution coming from continental Europe.
Precisely. And it brought with it significant technological advancements. We start seeing pottery being made and a much more sophisticated toolkit of polished stone implements.
And this move towards farming, it must have fundamentally changed how people lived, more settled lifestyles.
Absolutely. A fundamental change. People adopted more settled patterns of living compared to the more nomadic existence of the preceding Mesolithic period.
Okay.
And this move towards sedentary communities, it had far-reaching consequences. It reshaped social organization, economic practices, and the whole relationship between humans and their environment. And crucially, for our discussion today, this period witnessed the emergence of large-scale monument construction on, well, an unprecedented scale.
And these weren't just functional buildings, were they? I mean, the sheer effort involved, it suggests something deeper.
Unquestionably. The construction of megalithic monuments like these tombs, along with things like stone circles and alignments, it really indicates a growing complexity in social structures.
Takes a lot of organization.
It does. The immense labor and resources required imply they held considerable social, spiritual, maybe even political importance. They likely served as central locations for ritual practices, ceremonies, commemoration of ancestors, anchoring communities to their land and their past.
Now, you mentioned the arrival of these Neolithic practices. It wasn't necessarily a simple case of one group replacing another, was it? There's still some debate there.
That's a critical point, yeah. The extent to which farming practices were adopted by the existing Mesolithic population versus being introduced by, say, migrating farming groups, that's been a subject of considerable debate.
But genetics is shedding some light now.
It is. Increasingly sophisticated genetic analysis points pretty strongly towards a significant role for incoming populations. People with ancestry originating way back in the Near East.
Wow.
These newcomers likely interacted and intermixed with the indigenous hunter-gatherer communities as they spread across Europe and eventually reached Ireland, probably by sea.
So it's a complex picture of interaction.
Very much so. And this new agricultural foundation, it didn't just alter how people got their food, it also paved the way for new social and ritual expressions. And these impressive stone monuments became integral to burial practices, ancestral veneration, and crucially, the assertion of land ownership in this newly claimed landscape.
Okay, so within this dynamic context, societal change, monument building, we get the portal tombs. Let's define them more clearly. What are the key characteristics?
Right. Well, while the term dolmen, which actually means stone table in Breton, is widely used and understood.
That's the common name, yeah.
It is. But archaeologists generally prefer portal tomb. And that designation emphasizes a key architectural feature: the presence of those two tall, upright stones that characteristically flank the entrance to the burial chamber.
The portal.
Exactly. You might also hear the older term cromlech in some historical texts, but portal tomb is probably the most descriptive. And despite some regional variations in size and minor details, portal tombs across Ireland share a core set of architectural elements that really distinguish them.
Okay, let's break those down. What are the main components we should picture?
Well, the most visually striking aspect, without a doubt, is the massive capstone,
The huge stone on top?
the huge stone on top. These are single, often colossal slabs of rock, frequently weighing many, many tons.
How heavy are we talking?
Well, to give you a sense of scale, the capstone at Brownsill in County Carlow, it's estimated to weigh somewhere between 100 and 160 tons.
160 tons. That's
Yeah.
incredible. One of the largest in Europe, isn't it?
It is. And typically, this immense capstone rests upon the two portal stones at the front, and it usually slopes downwards towards the rear.
Okay.
And back there, it's supported by a lower backstone, or in some cases, it might even rest directly on the ground or on smaller supporting stones.
The sheer scale of just moving and placing a stone that size, it's almost unimaginable without modern machinery.
It truly testifies to the considerable engineering knowledge and the immense collective effort involved. I mean, these capstones likely served as powerful symbols of communal strength, perhaps the status of those interred within or associated with the monument.
And the entrance, you mentioned the portal stones.
Yes, the entrance is defined by those two prominent portal stones. They're generally the tallest structural elements, creating a really dramatic, often imposing frame.
And behind them is the chamber itself.
That's right. The burial chamber itself is typically quite simple, a kind of box-like or rectangular space. It's formed by the portal stones, one or more side stones on each side, and then the backstone.
So those side and back stones are crucial for support.
Absolutely essential for providing stable support for the massive weight of the capstone. Interestingly, while a significant number of portal tombs face east, sort of towards the rising sun.
A common orientation for megaliths.
Right. It's quite common, yeah. But it's not universal for portal tombs. There are some examples, like down at Ardurwani and Hagleslin in County Cork. They're oriented in other directions, which suggests that, factors beyond just solar alignment were also important in deciding where and how to build them.
So the capstone is undeniably the star of the show, isn't it? The whole design seems geared toward showcasing this singular, massive piece of rock.
Precisely. I think that's a really good way to put it. The sheer effort involved in sourcing it, sometimes even shaping the underside of the capstone, maybe to create a more level or aesthetically pleasing surface.
That actually shaped these huge stones.
There's evidence for it, yeah. And then seemingly precariously balancing it, often on relatively small contact points of the uprights. It strongly suggests that visual impact and a demonstration of engineering capability were primary objectives, perhaps even outweighing the purely functional aspect of just creating a burial space.
So it's partly performance, a statement.
I think so. Some researchers argue that the very essence of the portal tomb lies in this monumental stone and the complex act that's placement. It's about the display.
And this architectural style, it wasn't just a brief fad. When do we think these portal tombs were actually being built and used?
Right. The generally accepted dating for portal tombs in Ireland, it falls within the period of approximately 3800 BC down to about 3000 BC. So that puts them firmly in the earlier phases of the Neolithic period.
And how do we arrive at those dates?
Well, the dating is primarily derived from radiocarbon analysis, the method used to date ancient organic materials found within the tombs, specifically human remains and associated organic artifacts.
Like charcoal, maybe.
Exactly, or bone collagen. And also the study of accompanying artifacts, particularly pottery styles. Things like the Lyell's Hill series, Neolithic pottery, that's a specific type characteristic of that era that also helps establish their chronology.
Are there any key sites where the dating evidence has been particularly revealing?
Oh, definitely. Pulnabrone in County Clare stands out. It's one of the most extensively dated portal tombs.
That's the famous one in the Burren, right?
That's the one. Human skeletal remains discovered there have yielded radiocarbon dates spanning roughly 3800 BC to 3200 BC. And notably, these represent the earliest Neolithic human remains discovered in Ireland to date.
Oh, wow, the earliest.
Which really underscores the early emergence of this tomb tradition. But it's important to remember, the burials at Pulnabrone seem to have occurred over several centuries. It wasn't a single event. It shows prolonged use.
Right, generations using the same monument.
Exactly. Another significant example is Kilclooney Moor up in County Donegal. Based on its association with that Lyell's Hill series pottery, It's estimated to date from around 307 AD BC to 30950 BC. So these dates help us situate portal tombs within the broader timeline of the Irish Neolithic.
Okay, so they were appearing around the same time as other early megalithic monuments in Ireland.
Yes, broadly speaking, portal tombs are considered to be among the earliest forms of megalithic tombs in Ireland. They're generally contemporary with court tombs, at least during their initial phases, say before about 3600 BC.
Court tombs being another type of early megalithic structure.
Correct. And interestingly, there are suggestions of potentially differing socioeconomic contexts for these two tomb types.
Oh, how so?
Well, court tombs are often found quite close to known settlement sites, possibly indicating a stronger link to arable farming communities, whereas portal tombs are frequently located outside of obvious settlements, sometimes near rivers or other water sources. This has led to some theories suggesting a possible association with groups who maybe placed a greater emphasis on pastoralism, raising animals.
A different focus, perhaps.
Perhaps. And it's also noteworthy that the use of portal tombs seems to have persisted even after a decline in evidence for widespread crop cultivation around 3500 BC. That's a period that also coincides with the decline in the construction and use of court tombs, so portal tombs seem to continue on.
That's a subtle but potentially significant distinction. Now let's think about the origins of this very distinct architectural style. Was it something that developed locally here in Ireland, or were there influences coming in from elsewhere?
Yeah, the question of origins. It's a subject of ongoing scholarly discussion. While it's conceivable, that the style could have developed indigenously,
Just sprang up here.
maybe evolving from earlier building traditions or arising as a local innovation within the early Neolithic. But there are quite compelling arguments pointing towards connections with continental Europe, particularly the region of Brittany in northwestern France.
Brittany, what's the evidence for that link?
Well, the most persuasive evidence lies in the striking architectural similarities. You look at Irish portal tombs and certain types of megalithic structures found in Brittany, and they look very similar.
The basic design concept.
Yes. Furthermore, some comparable Breton monuments are believed to predate their Irish counterparts. Some estimates place their construction as early as the first half of the 5th millennium BC.
So potentially earlier than the Irish examples.
Potentially, yes. This possible chronological precedence, coupled with those clear architectural parallels, the massive capstone supported by uprights, it suggests a plausible scenario where the concept of portal tomb construction, or at least key design principles, might have been introduced to Ireland through maritime contact.
Boats across the Channel and Irish Sea.
Exactly. Exchange of ideas with communities across the water. And this kind of challenges a simplistic model of a single Neolithic package just arriving around 4000 BC. It suggests maybe more complex, perhaps even earlier interactions, and the transmission of specific cultural practices like tomb building.
Okay, let's get back to the construction itself. These weren't just piled up rocks. There was serious engineering involved. What can we figure out about the techniques they used?
Oh, constructing portal tombs was a truly monumental undertaking. It demanded considerable engineering skill and meticulous planning. Just consider the initial challenge.
Yeah.
Sourcing these massive stones.
Laying the right rock.
And sometimes from quarries located quite a distance from the final monument site. At Ternany, for example, there's a nearby outcrop of basalt that seems to have been the likely source material.
And getting the stone out.
Quarrying probably involved relatively basic but effective techniques. Things like using stone hammers, maybe wooden wedges driven into cracks, possibly even fire setting.
Heating the rock, then cooling it quickly.
Exactly, to induce fracturing. And as we discussed earlier, there's evidence at some sites suggesting deliberate shaping of the stones, particularly the undersides of the capstones.
And then the really big challenge, moving these multi-ton behemoths across potentially rough terrain.
Exactly. Transportation would have required a tremendous amount of human labor, possibly augmented by using domesticated animals, like oxen perhaps.
How would they have moved them? Rollers? Sledges?
Techniques likely involve levers, certainly rollers probably made from timber, maybe sledges pulled by ropes, and just sheer coordinated effort from a large group of people.
Okay, so they get the stones to the site. How do they lift that massive capstone up onto the uprights? Ramps.
Well, traditional theories often envision using earthen ramps to raise stones into position for some megaliths. But for portal tombs, the raising in situ hypothesis has gained quite a bit of traction.
raising it in place? How would that work?
The idea is that the capstone might have been moved relatively close to its intended location, maybe at ground level, and then gradually lifted using a system of levers and temporary supports or chocks, maybe building up a platform underneath it bit by bit.
Like jacking it up slowly.
Sort of, yeah. While the upright portal stones were maneuvered into place beneath it, this method might actually have been more practical and efficient than constructing enormous earthen ramps for each individual tomb, especially given the often precarious balancing act.
It really underscores the communal nature of these projects, doesn't it? You couldn't do this alone.
Undeniably. The sheer scale and complexity imply a high degree of social organization, cooperation, and logistical coordination within these early Neolithic communities.
Has excavation shed any light on the actual building process?
Yes. Although excavations of portal tombs themselves are somewhat limited compared to other monument types, they do offer valuable glimpses. At the Ternary portal tomb, for instance, excavation revealed evidence of a multi-phase construction sequence.
So built in stages.
Seems like it. It started with digging initial foundation pits for the stones, then placing the back and side stones, then creating a prepared floor surface inside, and finally erecting those prominent front or portal stones. And intriguingly, there was even evidence of a fire having been deliberately lit in the area where one of the portal stones was going to be erected before they put the stone up.
Ritual activity during construction.
It certainly suggests that ritual acts were possibly integrated into the very process of building. We also find evidence for the use of smaller stone wedges, strategically placed to stabilize the upright stones. Little practical details.
That's fascinating, the mix of the practical and the potentially ritualistic. Now, what about the original appearance? We see these exposed stone structures today. Were they always like that? Was there a mound covering them?
The cairn conundrum. That's a critical question, and frankly a subject of ongoing debate among researchers.
So no easy answer.
Not entirely. Early interpretations often assume that portal tombs, like many other types of chambered tombs from the Neolithic, were originally covered by mounds of earth or stone cairns.
That seems logical for a tomb.
It does. However, a compelling counterargument has emerged. It suggests that the dramatic stone architecture, especially those massive, often seemingly precariously balanced capstones, was intentionally left exposed.
Why? To impress.
Exactly. To create an imposing visual statement in the landscape. Proponents of this view argue that the impressive display of engineering skill and monumental scale would have been largely hidden if the structures were completely buried within a cairn.
Makes sense. You go to all that effort.
You want people to see it, perhaps. And while some portal tomb sites do show traces of cairn material, maybe a low platform or packing stones around the base, many others show little or no substantial evidence for a complete covering mound.
So the evidence for cairns is patchy.
It is. And this debate directly impacts how we interpret their primary purpose. Were they meant for visible, public display, asserting presence and power? Or were they primarily designed as secluded burial chambers, hidden away? The lack of extensive cairn evidence at many sites lends weight to the idea that the visual impact of the exposed stonework was a really significant part of their design and function.
Okay, so let's imagine we could peek inside one of these chambers back when it was in use, assuming it wasn't disturbed later. What might we find?
Right. Well, archaeological excavations of the chambers, where they've been possible and productive, have revealed pretty consistent evidence for communal burial practices, not just single individuals.
Multiple people.
Yes. And again, Polnerbron is one of the best studied examples here. The skeletal remains of at least 33 individuals were discovered there. Men, women, children.
A whole community snapshot, almost.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
The demographic profile suggests a relatively young average age at death. Many individuals estimated to have been under 30.
Life was tough.
It seems so. Analysis of the bones has revealed evidence of physically demanding lives. Signs of arthritis, vertebral wear consistent with heavy labor.
What about diet?
Dental analysis from Polnerbron indicates a diet that was largely plant-based, with maybe limited consumption of animal protein. There's also evidence of dental decay and signs of illness or malnutrition in some individuals.
Any signs of violence?
Interestingly, yes. Some of the remains also show evidence of trauma. There was a healed skull fracture on one individual, and another had a projectile point, like an arrowhead tip, actually embedded in one of the bones.
Wow. So it paints a vivid picture of life and death for these early farming communities. What about the funerary rites themselves? How were the dead treated?
The evidence suggests quite complex, maybe multi-stage funerary processes. The discovery of disarticulated and commingled remains like at Polnerbron, where bones were found scattered and mixed together.
So not complete skeletons laid out neatly.
Generally not, no. This indicates that bodies might have undergone a period of decomposition somewhere else before selected bones were brought into the tomb. It's a practice known as excarnation.
Leaving the body exposed first.
Potentially, yes. Or perhaps buried temporarily elsewhere. While cremation seems less common in portal tombs compared to some other monument types, tiny fragments of burnt human bone have been identified at sites like Ternany.
So some variation.
Some variation. But what is clear is that these tombs were typically used for sequential depositions. Remains were added over extended periods, sometimes spanning centuries. This really highlights their enduring role as focal points for ancestral veneration and communal identity. They weren't just one-off burial spots.
And were people buried with anything? Grave goods, personal items?
Yes, deposits of grave goods and other material culture have been found within portal tomb chambers, though the types and quantities can vary quite a bit from site to site.
What kind of things?
Fragments of pottery are relatively common finds, often just small, scattered sherds, which might suggest that maybe whole pots were broken deliberately as part of the ritual.
Ritual breakage.
Possibly. Stone tools like polished axe heads and flint knives have also been discovered. At Ternany, for example, a specific type of flint knife, a discoidal one, was found near the entrance, while different types, plano-convex knives, were found inside the chamber itself.
Specific placement.
It hints at structure, doesn't it? Ornaments are less frequent, but we do find them. Examples include beads and pendants made from bone and quartz found at Polnebron.
Quartz seems to pop up a bit.
It does. The relatively frequent presence of pieces of quartz, often unworked white quartz pebbles, at various portal tomb sites suggests this material might have held a particular symbolic significance for these communities, maybe related to light or the otherworld.
Pure speculation, but interesting.
Exactly. And the placement of these items, like the knives at Ternany, sometimes appears structured, hinting at deliberate ritual deposition and a symbolic use of the interior space.
So this long-term use, the commingled remains, it wasn't necessarily just close family.
It suggests maybe not just close biological relatives, but perhaps a wider community group being represented there. These sites seem crucial in creating collective ancestral identities. The idea of the visible dead ancestors who remain present, symbolically at least, within the community's memory and physically anchored in the landscape over many generations.
Let's talk about that landscape. These impressive monuments, they aren't just dotted randomly across Ireland, are they? Is there a pattern to where we find them?
No, definitely not random. The distribution of portal tombs in Ireland is quite specific and reveals some interesting patterns. The majority there are about 170 to 200 known examples.
Okay.
Most are predominantly located in the northern half of the island. You find notable concentrations in South and West Ulster, the North Midlands, and Southeast Leinster.
So fewer in the south and west.
Generally fewer in regions like County Clare and the coastal areas of Mayo, Galway, and Donegal. However, there are some significant outliers that extend beyond these main zones, like the Killiclathane tombs way down in County Kerry, and those examples we mentioned earlier, Ardorwani and Ahuglaslin in County Cork.
And within these regions, do they favor particular spots in the landscape? Hills, valleys?
Yes, there are some recurring patterns in their siting. Typically, portal tombs are situated outside of obvious settlement areas. They frequently show an association with shallow valleys and often with water sources nearby, like streams and rivers.
Near water.
Often, yeah. And strikingly, nearly half of all known portal tombs are located very close to natural rock outcrops.
Which makes sense for sourcing the stone.
Exactly. It likely served as a convenient source of the raw materials. Polnebron, sitting there in the stark limestone landscape of the Burren, is a classic example, and Ternany, near its basalt outcrop.
Any other sighting factors? Maybe roots?
Some researchers have suggested their placement might have been influenced by the presence of ancient routeways, perhaps marking significant locations along these early communication and travel corridors. Path markers, almost.
So their placement seems quite deliberate. What does this suggest about their function and how these communities related to their land?
Well, the prominent settings they often occupy, and that often visually striking architecture, strongly suggests that portal tombs may have served, at least partly, as territorial markers.
Staking a claim.
Pretty much. In a newly established agricultural landscape, these enduring monuments could have functioned to demarcate the territories claimed for different social groups, assert ownership of essential resources like good land or water, and communicate a sense of collective identity. This is our place.
And the act of building them reinforced that.
Absolutely. The substantial communal effort required for their construction would itself have served as a powerful statement of social cohesion and a shared connection to the land. Furthermore, their strategic placement, sometimes near what might have been perceived as boundaries between groups, supports the interpretation of these monuments as a form of visual language, communicating social and ritual information across the Neolithic landscape.
Gateways to the otherworld. It's such a powerful, evocative phrase often used for these monuments. Does that capture their main purpose, do you think, or was it broader than that?
It's evocative, certainly, but the accumulating archaeological evidence really suggests that portal tombs likely served multifaceted functions. They probably weren't just burial sites.
Okay, what else?
They were likely also important ancestral shrines, places where communities could connect with and venerate their deceased forebears, which in turn would reinforce lineage ties, claims to land, claims to resources.
So active places, not just passive memorials.
Exactly. They may also have functioned as ceremonial centers for various communal rituals and gatherings. We see hints of this. The discovery of those structured deposits of artifacts, like the flint knives at Ternity.
Right, the different types inside and out.
Yeah. The evidence for the use of fire, both at Ternity during construction and those potential scorch marks at Polnabrone. And broader research suggests evidence for feasting activities happening near dolmens sometimes. All this points towards a significant ritual component in their use, beyond just disposing of the dead.
And what about the symbolism, the meaning embedded in them?
Well, ancestral veneration seems to have been a central theme, as we've said. And the very concept of a portal, it's inherently symbolic, isn't it? It suggests a gateway, a liminal space between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, or maybe the other world itself.
Polnabrone almost looks like a doorway.
It really does, with its almost skeletal open structure. It could be seen as a literal manifestation of that idea. And while the common easterly orientation suggests potential cosmological alignments, a connection to the rising sun maybe.
But not always.
But not always. Those exceptions we noted earlier indicate that other factors perhaps relating to specific landscape features, or maybe other celestial events or sightlines, were also significant in their placement. It wasn't just one rule.
And later folklore picked up on these sites.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating how later folklore and myth often incorporated these ancient sites. They become associated with legendary figures like Diarmuid in Grain. Diarmuid in Grain's beds is a common folk name for dolmens. Or they're seen as giants' graves or druids' altars. This highlights their enduring perception as powerful, ancient, and potentially otherworldly places within the cultural memory long after their original purpose was forgotten.
You mentioned earlier that recent ancient DNA research is kind of challenging some traditional ideas about who is buried in these tombs. How does that affect our understanding of their social meaning?
Yes, that's a really important recent development. Analyses of ancient DNA from individuals buried in megalithic tombs, including some portal tombs, are suggesting that burial within these communal monuments wasn't solely based on close biological relatedness, like a simple family vault.
Not just direct lineage.
It seems not always, or not exclusively. Instead, the evidence points towards broader concepts of community and what some researchers call kinwork.
Kinwork.
Yeah, the idea that kinship and social ties are actively created and maintained through shared practices, shared beliefs, communal activities like building and using these monuments together. It's not just about blood relations.
So a shared identity through action.
Exactly. And this emerging picture actually aligns quite well with some earlier archaeological interpretations, like Powell's suggestion years ago that portal tombs might not have been primarily about demarcating descent groups in a strict genealogical sense.
Right.
The very act of constructing these impressive monuments and performing the associated rituals likely played a crucial role in fostering social cohesion, reinforcing shared beliefs, and solidifying a collective Neolithic worldview that extended beyond narrow definitions of biological kinship. It helped build the community.
So as we draw our exploration towards a close, what are the key insights, the main takeaways from this deep dive into Ireland's enigmatic portal tombs?
Well, I think in essence, portal tombs emerge as really complex socio-ritual monuments. They reflect the remarkable ingenuity, the evolving social organization, and the intricate belief systems of Neolithic Ireland.
More than just piles of stone.
Much more. Their distinctive architecture showcases impressive engineering capabilities. Their funerary practices reveal sophisticated beliefs about death, the ancestors, maybe the journey beyond. Their strategic placement within the landscape suggests territorial significance and a deep connection to place. And the various interpretations of their purpose highlight these multifaceted roles, not just burial places, but ancestral shrines, ceremonial centers, potent symbols of community identity.
And despite all the research done, there are still quite a few unanswered questions hanging over these ancient monuments, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely. We're still grappling with uncertainties. The precise construction methods they used, especially lifting those capstones, the original appearance, that whole cairn conundrum we talked about, the specific meanings and performance of the rituals associated with them, the really nuanced aspects of Neolithic social organization they reflect.
Why are they distributed the way they are?
Exactly. The underlying reasons for their specific geographical distribution patterns and the full extent and nature of their connections with contemporary cultures back in continental Europe, there's still a lot to learn. And it's maybe fair to say that in some respects, portal tombs have perhaps received a bit less scholarly attention compared to some other categories of megalithic monuments, like passage tombs maybe. So there's considerable scope for future research.
So, what are some of the exciting directions that future research into portal tombs might take? Where do we go from here?
There are several promising avenues, I think. Advanced scientific analyses are key. Further ancient DNA studies, isotopic analysis of human remains, and artifacts that can tell us more about the individuals buried there, their origins, mobility, diet.
More personal stories, almost.
In a way, yes. More detailed landscape studies, too, incorporating things like spatial analysis, environmental data that can further illuminate the relationship between portal tomb placement and the surrounding environment, land use.
Finding more sites.
Continued geophysical surveys and, where appropriate, carefully planned and executed archaeological excavations at underexplored or newly discovered sites can undoubtedly uncover new structural and artifactual evidence. Comparative studies looking closely at similar megalithic traditions in other regions of Europe will continue to refine our understanding of their origins and interconnections.
And thinking about the ritual side more.
Yes, deepening that ritual perspective, drawing on interdisciplinary approaches, integrating archaeology, anthropology, perhaps even carefully considered insights from folklore that promises to enhance our comprehension of the complex belief systems that underpin their construction and use.
So these enduring gateways to the otherworld, they certainly continue to hold many secrets, inviting us to keep delving deeper into Ireland's Neolithic past.
Indeed. They stand as a powerful and lasting legacy, don't they? A constant reminder of the complex and sophisticated ways in which prehistoric communities grappled with fundamental human concerns. Life, death, the ancestors, the enduring bonds of community. They encourage us, I think, to reflect on these ancient structures and their profound place in the ongoing story of humanity on this island.